travelers and tourists. My name is Mark, and I am the local disaster tour guide. That's right, I am a storyteller that hasn't started an argument with my fan base in a while, so I thought I would do a class ranking video to see if I could generate a little internet controversy. Welcome to a journey through the fantastic world of TTRPGs like Pathfinder and Starfinder. Today, I'm going to be ranking all of the classes in Starfinder, but to help me on this journey, I've invited one of my good friends on to join me in this conversation. So, to my guest today, would you care to introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. I am the Goat King, and well, I suppose this isn't the realm. I am outside my lands, but I am happy to be here, and I am happy to help.
Okay, so for this video, to give you all kind of a overview of how this happened, originally I've just felt bad for a while because I really love the game Starfinder, but Pathfinder is just one of those games that has so much content. It dominates my channel, and I just kind of promised myself I was going to give Starfinder the space it deserved, and I came up with this big idea of what I called Starfinder in September. And then fans of the channel may know I went and injured myself. So Starfinder in September's turned it into like a week, but I still wanted to spend some time talking about what I think is one of the most creative RPGs I've seen out there. I really enjoy a lot of just the fantastic storytelling that Paizo does with Starfinder. So today I've invited the Goat King to come onto my channel, and we're just going to discuss our thoughts on the different classes in Starfinder. But in addition to this conversation, I'm going to be appearing on the Goat King's channel as well, and these videos should be going up at about the same time. So be on the lookout for a link to go over to his channel and check that video out as well. Over on his channel, he discusses a lot of the species in Starfinder. So we're not going to discuss all of the species, but we are going to talk about some of our favorites. So, Goat King, care to tell us a little bit more about your channel before we dive into this content?
Oh. My channel primarily focuses on Pathfinder 2nd Edition and Starfinder, and in a few years, Starfinder 2nd Edition, but we'll probably touch on playtest material in the field guides pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I started out mostly with a series of videos about how to run Starship Combat, mostly because I thought it would be really helpful, and I've
Mm-hmm.
continued ever since. I took on the big project of discussing all the species in Starfinder, and there are a lot of them. But
Have
I
you hit
also
have you hit the halfway mark yet?
I haven't kept count. Probably, probably, um, probably. But I alternate between Pathfinder and Starfinder videos, and I think my next Pathfinder video is going to be about backgrounds.
Awesome.
Or backstories, more specifically.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the channel today. And the format for this video is going to be pretty simple. We're just going to go through all of the Starfinder classes. We're going to start with Biohacker. We're going to go through alphabetically, and we're going to give them a ranking out of 10. We're going to talk about what we like, what we don't like, what we think Paizo designed well with the classes, and where we think the classes could improve. And we'll just see where this conversation goes. For those of you who are watching, this is probably a video that you can just kind of listen to. I'll have a few graphics up on screen, but this is probably just going to be a chatting video, so this is something you can probably listen to in the background. But with all of that out of the way, let's dive into the conversation. Let's start with the Biohacker. So, Goat King, what score did you give the Biohacker? And I guess start out with what you think is its most prominent strength and most prominent weakness.
I gave the Biohacker an 8 out of 10. And getting into these rankings, I do want to mention I have not gotten to play all of the classes, and there is a great deal of personal bias
Hmm.
involved in these classes. And, for example, one of the reasons the Biohacker was ranked so highly is because it captures my imagination.
Hmm.
I When I read the Biohacker, I immediately had several character ideas for it, and
Hmm.
I had to play this class. Um, Honestly, they play a lot like a support caster or like a debuff caster without the spell slots.
Hmm.
They do have a daily resource, but they're really focused around buffs and debuffs.
Hmm.
I think they're pretty cool.
Okay. Um, so I guess I should preface my commentary on the biohacker. My overall philosophy in this video is I ranked classes primarily on one scale. How much do I want to play them? I say this because I guarantee you there are going to be some biohacker fans who will be mad at me. Biohacker is one of my least favorite classes, not because I think the class is badly designed, but because I hate needles, and the fact that the class is focused on injection weapons just freaks me out and makes me not want to play the class. Um, so I gave the class an overall score of 4 out of 10, but that's more a reflection of like the narrative of the class just correlates to a personal phobia of mine, and that keeps me away from the class. Like when I look at the class mechanically, I think it's very well designed, and like the super serum ability at I forget exactly I don't know if that's level 20 or just like right before level 20, but it's one of the big payoff abilities of the class. Like that feels very appropriate to the class fantasy of the biohacker. I think Paizo did a good job designing the class, but they just went all in on injection weapons, and that was just like a nope for me personally. So the
That
biohacker is the class that I was not fair to, and I fully accept anyone in the comments who says that.
that is entirely fair. I think for me, the Biohacker could have gotten a little bit better ranking, but one thing that stuck out to me was there's a point where there's some fiddly complexity with it, especially
Hmm.
when some of your stuff is calling on making not types of serums that are built into
Hmm.
your class description, but specifically medicinals that you've got to go
Hmm.
look up separately.
Hmm.
So it did take a small knock for complexity for me, because
Hmm.
as much as I personally like the deeper, more complex classes, that that's gonna hurt other people playing the game,
Hmm. Yeah,
or at least limit them.
it does seem like a class that has a little bit of complexity to it, and I think it's one of those like you got to accept that to want to dive into it. Um, the one thing I will give them credit for is I really didn't expect the depth of subclasses that they came up with for the biohacker. You know,
Yeah.
it to do the this is probably a bit of a lazy comparison, but the 2E alchemist. The 2E alchemist has essentially four subclasses. The biohacker has so many fields of study. It's kind of amazing. I think one of my favorite is the thaumapathy, which is medicinally altering a person's ability to use magic. Like, that's a fun niche of the rules I wouldn't have even thought of. So,
It's one of the ones that came out pretty early in, and it really got to benefit from a lot of books coming out that kept expanding on what it could do.
mm-hmm. So for anyone who is interested in the biohacker, I do think it is mechanically well done. If you can get past the fear of needles that I have, it's probably worth checking out. So, um, do you have any other standout elements from the class that you wanted to discuss, or?
No, no, It's I ranked them pretty simply. It captured my imagination. It held
Hmm.
its theme very solidly, very
Hmm.
firmly, kept up exactly what it promised on the tin,
Hmm.
and it was well expanded. The only real issue with it is it gets a little complicated depending on the things you pick,
Hmm.
but very solid class. I like it.
All right. Um, so the next class, and I'll go first on this one, is the Envoy. And this is another class where I feel like I was a little bit mean, but for a different reason. The Biohacker, I like the mechanical design, but the narrative is just something I can't embrace. The Envoy's almost the reverse for me. The narrative I enjoy, but the mechanics don't engage me. And so I gave the Envoy an overall score of 5 out of 10. The big issue with the Envoy for me is they really push hard into skills, especially with the expertise class feature, but Operative is just better at skills.
You
And,
know,
oh, sorry.
that honestly, to spoil a little bit, that is something I marked negatively on the operative.
Hmm.
A little hint towards the future of this video.
Um, the, like, there are small niches or portions of the rules where the envoy can push maybe a little bit harder than the operative can, but the overall, like, if I'm going to play a character that's deeply invested in skills, I feel like the operative does a better job of that. And the expertise class feature is just one of those, like, it needed a little bit more to really engage me and make me want to play the class. Now, there is a variant Envoy build that gives them some spell casting. I do enjoy that, and there was an alternate class feature called Polymorphic Disguise that I thought was pretty cool. So, like, there's been some fun takes on the Envoy. If you go with the core rulebook version, it would have been my least favorite class. But as the game has progressed, Paizo has put out other options for it that has pushed it farther up and made me say, okay, there's some stuff here that appeals to me. So, but what were your thoughts on the Envoy?
I gave the Envoy a 7 out of 10.
Okay.
I thought, for what it was trying to do,
Mm-hmm.
it was solid. It kept squarely in its box.
Mm-hmm.
It's You did mention its skills and the way it can expand into skills. It's tied to specific skills.
Mm-hmm.
It can't just expand into all the skills with its special abilities, which, in some cases, for some people, clearly a negative. I felt that, well, I would like to have been able to expand further out, but
Mm-hmm.
it did hold to the theme very well.
Mm-hmm.
And, as you did mention, they were well expanded going forward. Honestly, I thought they were just a very straightforward class. They were very to the point.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I don't think they're too hard for new players to get into.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm excited to see what an envoy would do brought into second edition.
Mm-hmm.
That's a little small thing that tugs me forward on them is I really want to see what's going to happen to them when they get brought into the newer system.
Mm-hmm. The From a narrative perspective and from a roleplay perspective, I think the Envoy is a perfect fit for Starfinder. Um, you know, especially if you're someone who enjoys getting into character, I think the Envoy has a lot of opportunities for that and is really, really good. It's just the crunchy side of the class. There's nothing that I just really want to sink my teeth into, and that's what held it back for me. But Paizo has shown that, like, they've got some ideas there. And I'm kind of like you. I think when the second edition version of the Envoy comes out, I think we're going to see some more of that creativity coming out. And I will probably be a lot more excited when that happens. So, um, Did I interrupt you on anything on your
No,
thought? Okay,
no.
sorry. I just got to going and I.
Oh yeah.
Um, all right, so up next is one of the newer classes, the Evolutionist. What was your score, and what are some of your thoughts in general on the Evolutionist?
So the evolutionist for me, it got a 5.
Hmm.
Um, and I do want to say my rankings swing all the way down to a 1 for one of these classes. It's not that I think that class is unplayable or that the tens are like the only ones you should play.
Hmm.
I was trying to give some granularity
Hmm.
to how we're referring to these. Otherwise, they would have all been 5 or up for
Hmm.
me,
Hmm.
because they've all got good things about them. But the evolutionist, it pulls on some positions in play. The evolutionist pulls on some game design that we've seen in previous classes, specifically like the Solarian and the
Hmm.
Vanguard. I feel like it pulls heavily on those, being that it's got this resource pool that builds up through combat and it uses to do cool things, and it's got
Hmm.
a weapon built in. You
Hmm.
can't disarm them. You can't stop them. Honestly, I think the only thing holding it back is that it came. It's like the last class we're gonna get for the game.
Yeah.
So we're not getting much expansion on it. We're not gonna
Hmm.
see where it could have gone had it been earlier in the life cycle of the game.
I feel that this is one of those classes where I think you're right. I would have loved to see what would have happened if the writers and designers for Paizo had more time to play with the evolutionist. I did a little bit higher here. I actually gave it a 7 out of 10 because this is a class where the mechanics really do engage me. Now, I will admit they are a little fiddly to like what you mentioned on the biohacker earlier. There's some points where there's just some mental exhaustion of this is more work than I want to do, but overall the mutation points, the adaptive strike, the design your own weapon that's integrated into your body, uh, that has like it's not just mechanically powerful, but it's the tie between mechanics and narrative is really strong, and I enjoy that. So that causes me to really sink into the class. The other thing that I really like about the evolutionist is they didn't go strictly, for lack of a better term, they didn't go Zerg on this class. They could have gone a strictly biological mutation points as part of the class, and so they could have kept it strictly different biological abilities. But the uh, the niche and the evolutionary focus, you have Eldritch, you have Mechanized, you have the Undead version. Like they gave you several different ways that your character has adapted their body, and that to me was like, okay, they didn't just go with the simple version of this class, but they found different ways that you could take these themes and turn it into a full concept. And I thought that was pretty impressive.
You know, thinking about that, perhaps I have been unfair to this class, because as you mentioned, with the subclasses being of a very wide variety, even though there's only a handful of them, they do cover a lot of the things that you might have seen as we went through the expansion books to Starfinder. And honestly, I can't argue with the flavor win on
Mm-hmm.
these. That custom weapon
Mm-hmm.
changing in the middle of combat, it's very cool.
Mm-hmm. So overall, the evolutionist is ranked fourth of all of my classes, mostly because I feel like they did such a good job of tying the mechanics to the narrative. But like you, I really hate that it was so late in the history of the game because I do think they could have done so much more. Um, did you have any other thoughts on the evolutionist before we move on?
No?
All right.
No, I
All right. Then we will enjoy the dramatic alphabetical jump that Starfinder gives us as we move from the letter E to the letter M for our next class, which is the mechanic. So, Goat King, how did you score the mechanic, and what do you think are some of its strengths and some of its weaknesses?
mechanic. Uh, it was my favorite class of the core rulebook when I first
Mm-hmm.
got the game. It captures the imagination for me. I scored it an 8 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Given that the mechanic had so long, because
Mm-hmm.
right from the core rulebook, it got so many really cool expansions
Mm-hmm.
on what it could do. If you're playing a drone mechanic, there's so many different drone chassis you can start from.
Mm-hmm.
It's a candy shop for me. I love it
Mm-hmm.
so much. The only bad thing about it
Mm-hmm.
is if you're playing the drone mechanic, or you're playing a high level exocortex mechanic who has a drone, because at high level you just get both,
Mm-hmm.
you end up having a lot to keep track of.
Mm-hmm.
Being that you can restat the drone, and so you've got to not only keep track of its stuff, but on occasion say, hey, should I change this up? Should I
Mm-hmm.
pull in something different? It's it's such a wonderful class to me, and I cannot hide my bias here. It's just so good, but that complication is gonna really stand in the way of a lot of other players.
Mm-hmm. The mechanic for me scored a 7 out of 10, and it was right there with the Evolutionist for me. Like, I had a hard time deciding which one I honestly was going to be better than the other. And the drone mechanic could sell the class by itself. Just honestly, like you said, there's so many drone chassis, there's so many drone options, there's so many things you can do with it. It's literally build a pet. And I've been gaming long enough. Pet classes are always popular. They always are. And the more options you have with pets, the better. So when you look at the mechanic and look especially at the drone mechanic, it's like you said, a candy shop. You let your imagination run wild. This is a playground. Um, and to add on to that, the mechanic has gotten pretty good support over the history of the game. Like, they've come in and they've offered the armor mechanic. I don't remember the exact name of the alternate class feature, but they've offered the vehicle mechanic, and you know the, they've got plenty of different flavors for the class that are all really engaging. They feel really appropriate to the setting, and it's really really fun. Honestly, for me, there's only one version of the mechanic that has never sold me, and I feel bad saying this. It's the Eco Cortex.
Exocortex?
Yeah,
Is it Ecocortex?
it might be Exocortex. I think it is Exocortex. This should tell you how little that feature sells me. um,
Fair enough.
just and like the concept is solid, and the execution is okay, but it's just one of those like there's this glorious option of the drone, and then there's this other thing over here that's technically part of the class.
Yeah, 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 I cannot argue against that. I feel like the mechanic might have been heavily inspired by Ranger,
Mm-hmm.
being that, Ranger's also a pet class, but Rangers also get this feature where they can
Mm-hmm.
pick a specific target and then get a bunch of bonuses
Mm-hmm.
against that target, and that's what the Exocortex does.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a shame you can't have both into your higher level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The I really wish they just. I wish they'd done a little bit more to make the exocortex an engaging. And it is probably exocortex. I've probably been mispronouncing it for years now. Um, but I wish they'd done just a little bit more to make that engaging, because sadly it's like series of beautiful options and then just this one that I'm like,
And there's, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like there's very little customization with the Exo Cortex. It's mostly
mm-hmm,
just a straight line.
mm-hmm.
And
Which is probably new player friendly, to be fair to Paizo.
that is, to be fair, that is a good way to get into the mechanic. And, by the time you're high level, you've probably got a lot more experience with the game. You're probably ready to add a pet to it as
Mm-hmm.
well. I do have one last thought, but
Okay.
I'll let you finish up with the mechanic first.
Um. Honestly, oh, that was the one note that my handwriting was terrible.
Oh, that's fair.
Uh,
That's fine.
okay, the overload class feature. That is a fun class feature that I feel is very appropriate to a setting like Starfinder, and I'm glad they included it. I probably should have talked about it earlier because it feels kind of just extra slapped on here. But I did have that as a positive towards the class. I do think that was a good thing Paizo included.
You done?
Yeah.
Okie dokie. Just before we move on from the mechanic, I do want to speak for it a sad little eulogy. Because I fear for it in
Mm-hmm.
Starfinder Second Edition. Being fully compatible with Pathfinder, I might not be fair to the inventor,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel the inventor was a port of the mechanic, and
Mm-hmm.
given they're gonna make the classes serve their own niche. I'm scared to see what's gonna happen to the mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hopeful. They what we've seen of some of the other classes has been interesting so far,
Mm-hmm.
but I really worry for the mechanic. I will probably have to riot if it is cut or not given due justice.
I will agree with you. I had not thought of that actually, and now you've got me scared. the But yeah, I can see the inventor does kind of tread some of the same ground, and uh, Paizo, we don't want to lose the mechanic. The build a pet's amazing. um,
And I don't want the inventor to just be ported back over to Starfinder,
mm-hmm,
because as cool as it is, as it because it
mm-hmm,
pulled from a lot of cool things from the mechanic, it just
mm-hmm,
doesn't match the Starfinder flavor.
mm-hmm.
It's a steampunk mechanic, not a sci-fi mechanic, and it
Yeah.
just
Um, I will say there is one other thing on the mechanic that I will talk about, but that's going to be later in the video because it's going to have more to do with another class. So I will be revisiting the mechanic a little bit because I do have some ideas about the mechanic in Starfinder 2e that I think Paizo could do. So we will go ahead and move on to the next class, and this is one of the spellcasting classes in Starfinder. Spellcasting classes have a little bit of a rough reputation with this game, but Goat King, what are your thoughts on the Mystic?
hmm. you know the Mystic is perhaps no, the Mystic is the spellcasting class that I ranked the highest,
Okay.
and a big part of that
Mm-hmm.
is because of something it shares with the soldier.
Okay.
The Mystic had this unenviable task
Mm-hmm.
of being able to represent the casters from Pathfinder First Edition,
Mm-hmm.
because all of that magic should still exist.
Yeah.
So the Mystic needed to be able to fill many different niches and fairly represent those niches. And I feel like it did a good job. I feel like its solid flavor got very well expanded, and the diversity of what it can do allows it to represent a lot of your casters, at least your core
Mm-hmm.
clasters, at least your core casters from Pathfinder First Edition, and I'm proud of it for that.
Mm-hmm.
If I did not already mention, it got a 6 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
and it's only so low because it's a caster. I love casters in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not fair what I'm doing to them here. They're doing the best they can with what
Mm-hmm.
they've been given. I just think spellcasting in Starfinder, not great. Not
Mm-hmm.
great, and I don't play casters in Starfinder for that reason.
There would be many people in the Starfinder community who would probably have some qualms with spellcasters in the game. And the overall, I actually enjoy two of the spellcasting classes, and then two of the spellcasting classes I have problems with. Mystic for me is one of them that I enjoy. I gave it a 7 out of 10. And like you, I think they did a good job with the kind of diversity of options that the class needed to represent. In fact, my number one note on this says connection diversity because they really did a good job of having all of these different types of spell casting that, like you said, should still exist. These should be abilities that people would still have, and they found a way to do a class that could cover that breadth really, really well. And the class, while it represents those things, doesn't feel constrained by those things. Like
Yeah.
one of my favorite examples, and this is kind of a you're playing an evil character if you go this route, but the Mindbreaker connection. You know, like that is
I mean, the name alone.
it's such a villain name to an option, but though you can see the inspiration, you can also tell that like they ran with it. They gave the idea the room it needed to really have some fun, you know? And there's a lot of stuff with the Mystic when you dive in and look at it that I feel like you said, I feel like they did a good job of representing these options that should be there.
And
And
they got it all in the core rulebook,
mm-hmm,
and then only expanded on it after that.
yeah, yeah. Another thing that I really like about the Mystic. Granted, this is kind of a thing I like about Starfinder, and the Mystic just kind of represents this. But the third level ability that allows him to start speaking with people telepathically and then like bonding with people telepathically as they level up. Telepathic communication is very common in Starfinder, and that's one of the things I like about the setting. Like it's a small detail, but every time it pops up, I'm just like, yes. Um, and
The
so,
it must be at least 10% of the species have
mm-hmm,
the basic level of telepathic communication. Like it must be.
mm-hmm. So the fact like that's just one of the small details of the setting that I like, and so the fact that it's built into the Mystic class is just a positive for me. So overall, I give the Mystic a 7 out of 10. Did you have any other thoughts?
No?
All right, then we will move on to another. I guess we would call this a new word class in the system. That is the Nanocyte. So, I think is it my turn to go first on this one? I think it
You
is.
know, I think we got it switched really early on. So
Oh,
and
uh,
I noticed it and I was like, I mean, it's not going to land where he wanted it. Maybe it'll get
oh,
switched again.
okay, all right. Um, well, I'll go ahead and say for the Nanocyte, this is actually one of my top three classes. It ranks number three for me. I gave it a score of a 7 out of 10, but it actually hold on. I think I messed up my notes somewhere. Um. Oh well. We're gonna run. I'm not gonna try to figure out my notes. But this is one of my favorite classes in the game. I can say that for sure. The Nanocyte is part of what I think Starfinder 2e can do with the mechanic to make it distinct from the inventor.
Like, incorporate them together.
Yes.
I'll have to think about that.
The uh like nanites is really one of the only things that the mechanic doesn't get to deal with that honestly feels like it could be part of the class. And really the nanocyte, which is what we're talking about here, they came up with a lot of really creative stuff to do with this simple concept of nanites. And we've actually got a video. I don't remember if I was on your channel or if you were on my channel, but we talked about the Nanocyte class in a collab before. I'll try to find a link and put it
I
up here
believe
somewhere.
that one was on your channel.
Oh. But like they came up with really creative stuff to go with this concept, and it fits the sci-fi theme so well. Just this is really one of those where like the mechanical options are exciting. The storytelling elements are perfectly on flavor. Just this is one of those classes where I feel like Paizo just hit exactly what the class needed to do. And the only complaint I have is take the mechanic and the nanocyte and push them together and make one super class.
Perhaps. Like I said, I'll have to think about that. I feel they're I feel, on initial first blush,
Mm-hmm.
that they are relatively distinct.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll have to give that idea some thought.
And I do realize there are some issues with that idea. That's maybe me swinging for the bleachers, but that is just one of the things that in my crazy version of Starfinder 2e, that's one of the thoughts I've had. But what are your thoughts on the nanocyte?
10 out of 10. Absolutely, 10 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Easy, knock it out of the park, 10 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
I, it's, I gave two classes 10 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
Nanocyte's one of them. They came early enough that they still got to benefit from getting a
Mm-hmm.
lot of expansions.
Mm-hmm.
But even in their initial presentation, they had a lot of variety of what they could do. You could be a healer, you could be a plague bringer, you could so much. You have options to control the battlefield, you have options to do damage. It's just a really well put together
Mm-hmm.
class. And this is one of the ones that just captured my imagination right away.
Mm-hmm.
I can't help it. They're
Mm-hmm.
so cool. They're
Mm-hmm.
so cool. The Nanocyte lets you do the Iron Man nanosuit suit up scene.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
it's beautiful. I love
Mm-hmm.
it.
And one of the things I will say to the nanocyte's credit, this is one of those classes that doesn't feel fiddly when it comes to the mechanics. Like they're you can push it to the point that it can be a lot of homework, but honestly, this feels like a class where the amount of work that you're doing compared to the amount of fun you're having, it feels like the balance is right.
Yeah, it's not a clean desk to be
Mm-hmm.
sure, but it's definitely not a disaster. It's
Mm-hmm.
things aren't nicely organized in right angles,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not piles everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's I agree with that.
Yeah, I think this class is surprisingly approachable even for new players. So, um, the Nanocyte easily a strong contender. Do you have any other thoughts before we move on to the operative?
No.
All right, then let's move on to the operative, one of the core rulebook classes. What are your thoughts on the operative, and what score did you give it?
I don't think people will like me for this one. I don't think people will like me for this one. Or they might agree.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see. I gave it a 1 out of 10. It's the only class that I gave that low score to. And again, I've spread the numbers out so
Mm-hmm.
that we could get some granularity. It's certainly a fully functional class.
Mm-hmm.
Power wise, it's got skills absolutely locked down.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to be good at skills, you pick the operative. And that's one of my problems with it. It is so to compare to
Mm-hmm.
the Pathfinder Second Edition Rogue,
Mm-hmm.
arguably, that class has skills absolutely locked down, and none of
Mm-hmm.
the other classes compare.
Right.
Some of the classes, like the investigator, I believe, they
Mm-hmm.
get bonus skills as well. They can get pretty close,
Mm-hmm.
but not quite there. But here's the thing: the rogue doesn't do any individual skill better than other classes are capable of doing.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to create a character and your initial thought is I want to make the best pilot, you're going to play an operative.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to create a character, they're the best hacker. They know computers, it's going to be an operative. If you want to create a character who's just a really good scientist, that's still going to be the operative. And it's the social skills. I think the envoy beats them out for social skills because they're
Mm-hmm.
adding a whole die in addition.
Mm-hmm.
But the operative, I think the operative hurts the game.
I
I think that ability it hurts the game, and that's my first problem with them.
I
Trick attack. Sorry,
Oh,
go
I knew
ahead.
it was coming. I knew it was coming. Go on. Talk about trick attack.
Trick attack being a full action? Granted, it lets you move, it lets you do a skill, and it lets you attack.
Mm-hmm.
So, arguably, from a mechanical perspective, it's on balance, it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
From a gameplay perspective, I feel like that's if playing an operative, I feel like that's the only thing I'm allowed to do.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to get my cool thing, I have to dedicate my turn to a trick attack, and it uses your whole turn,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to play like that. I I don't want to feel like I have to play like that specifically, and that's why it gets such a low score for me.
Mm-hmm. First off, though I scored the operative better, everything you said on trick attack is true. Like you have all of the agreement in the world from me. Um, I'll go ahead and say my score on the operative was a 6 out of 10. Um, and I'll get into my whys here in a moment, but the rogue, or not the rogue, the operative has some problems, and I think you're right. And one of my big complaints with the class is I feel like they were trying too hard to not just have sneak attack. Like, I don't know why they didn't just give them sneak attack as it already exists, or there was a variant of the rogue in Pathfinder First Edition that had a skirmish strike that was very similar to sneak attack. They could have done that. Like, there were options where they could have had sneak attack or a very close ability that would have been so much cleaner, so much easier to understand, and just would have reduced the complexity of the class that was not needed. So, trick attack is. I do not like the design, and I agree with you. Um, and I am sympathetic to your complaints about they are too good at skills. That being said, skills is also one of the reasons I rank the class well. Now, this is an area of like I could go really deep down a rabbit hole here. Um, Prior to the release of Pathfinder 2E, Starfinder had hands down the best skill system I had ever seen in a TTRPG ever. And it's a rabbit hole. I'd be chasing that detail for a long way, but there are a lot of small things about the skill system in Starfinder that Paizo got right. That at the time that Starfinder came out, it just It was truly amazing to me from all the different games I've seen. Now, Pathfinder 2e introduced some things that I hadn't even considered at that point, and I actually have a video somewhere on my channel where I go into this like I have trouble deciding if I like Starfinder skills or Pathfinder skills more because there's elements of both that I think are really well done. But the skill system in Starfinder is such a strong aspect of the game that the fact that the operative leans heavily into skills is a selling point for me. Now, I do think that you've got a fair criticism that it is kind of bad for the game to have one class that can lock down any skill. I totally agree with you there, but just the fact that the skill design of the game is good makes the operative a little bit more of a selling point for me. And honestly, if fans of this channel probably know, I typically don't like rogues in games. So the fact that an operative got a 6 out of 10 on my ranking should be considered a miracle.
A few more thoughts. Um, First, if you've ever, and you might not have, I've only ever did it the once. I wanted to design a whole party
Mm-hmm.
specifically to operate a spaceship really well.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized if I wanted to do that, and I really wanted to do it well, they'd all be operatives because
Mm-hmm.
spaceships are entirely based on skills.
Mm-hmm.
The captain might have been an envoy,
Mm-hmm.
but everybody else would have been an operative.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the skill system in Starfinder was pretty good. My only complaint, like proper complaint with it, is that all the feats are under one category, and
Mm-hmm.
Pathfinder made sure to separate them out so it's
Mm-hmm.
much less overwhelming to go through them and pick something you want. Um, my final thought on the operative, and I hadn't thought about it till now, but they're in a very similar position as the rogue.
Mm-hmm.
Or as, sorry, they're in a very similar position as the mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
Not in that they were sort of poached over to 2e, but in that they are in the same spot as another class,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't have the benefit of like the mystic did of doing lots of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They're just, I don't know if it's fair to say. I think it's fair to say they're just a worse rogue. And I don't, I mean it's Paizo. They'll probably do a
Mm-hmm.
pretty good job. I say that sounds, they'll probably do a great job,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, of making the 2e operative and making it its own thing. But man, I feel like it's in the same place as the mechanic that it's on dangerous waters there.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope it comes out okay.
Uh, I feel like when they did one of their blog posts, they mentioned some of the discussions around operative design. So I don't think they're ditching the class. Um, I can't remember what they said off the top of my head, but I do know the class was in there. But I think you're right. The finding a way to distinguish the operative from the rogue is going to be a bit of a challenge. So. Well, if you made people mad on the operative, it's going to be my turn to make people mad because now we get to talk about the precog. Um, the precog is first I gave it a score of 4 out of 10. It is the lowest class for me. It ranks 13 out of 13 in terms of all the classes in the game. The good of the precog, I'll put this up front. Narratively, Paizo did some interesting things. When you look at some of the narrative options that they give for the precog, like in Drift Crisis, there are some precog powers related to the Drift Crisis, and they found a way to tie that big event in the story to the class. That was cool. So there is some good narrative stuff for the precog that props to Paizo, they did well. Mechanically, pretty much everything they've ever said about the precog makes me not want to play the class. Um, First off, it's a spellcaster in Starfinder, which is troubled water to begin with. Just period. Then, it's a dex-based spellcaster. And I have been gaming long enough that dexterity as a god stat is just like it gives me a bad taste in my mouth the instant I see it. Um, when you have a class that can do everything tied to dexterity and the only thing they care about is dexterity and that makes them unstoppable, just no. It is a design that has happened in a lot of games over the years, and it's just one I don't like. And then, this was during the playtest. I don't know if this changed, and if it did change, someone please tell me because I might go back and take another look. But during the playtest, one of the things they said is that they designed the precog where it wasn't focused on teamwork, but rather it was focused on buffing itself and making itself a more powerful character. And that was such a break from all of the things I like about Paizo that it made me not even want to touch the class. Now, to be fair, they said that during pretest or playtest. What I don't know what I've been saying. I'm sorry, but they said that during the playtest. That very much could have changed, but it soured me on the class so much that even after it came out, I've just never wanted to dive into the class.
I've got to say I've never looked into the precog in exhaustive detail. It's a caster,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't play Starfinder casters. But I gave it the same score, 4 out of 10. But that means something very different to me.
Okay.
It got a lower score than the Mystic, but this is the only caster that captured my imagination. This is the only caster I wanted to play.
Mm-hmm.
The dexterity was a god stat during the playtest. After the playtest, it had dexterity for its precog based
Mm-hmm.
abilities, but it used intelligence for its
Okay.
spellcasting abilities. In my opinion, that makes it a little multi-attribute dependent. It's not
Mm-hmm.
bad, but in Starfinder you don't get a lot to distribute, so
That's true.
it's you're choosing one or the other there. You really
Mm-hmm.
are. Um, just part of why casters feel so
Mm-hmm.
bad in Starfinders because they need to have Dex or Strength as well because their spells aren't
Mm-hmm.
worth all that much. Anywho, I could rant. Gonna
Mm-hmm.
try not to. They
The,
captured my imagination,
mm-hmm.
and the theme there.
Mm-hmm.
I felt it was solidly supported by the mechanics. You got these. I don't remember what they were called, but you got to roll some dice at the beginning of the day, and then you could call on them later.
Was it the
Uh,
paradox?
it might have been, but that might have been the name of the feats. Because each class had a different name for its class feats, which. But
Yeah.
its daily resource was dice you rolled at the beginning of the day. You
Mm-hmm.
could sub them in for stuff, or you could burn them to activate certain abilities. I thought that was cool. I
Mm-hmm.
thought as you leveled up, you got just more and more ways that you could use these.
Mm-hmm.
There were ways that you could use. There were ways you could use the lower rolls and
Mm-hmm.
have them be useful. And there were, of course, ways you could use the higher rolls and have them be useful. I thought it was cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, again, I didn't go into it in exhaustive detail, so I can't argue for how well or poorly it handled teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
If they didn't end up pushing it towards teamwork, then boy, Paizo does a great job with game design in teamwork and making teamwork important. But man, that's unfortunate.
Yeah. A- And actually, I will throw this out to anyone watching this video. Let us know if the final version came together better than the playtest. Like, I will honestly admit the playtest on the Precog soured me so much it makes me hard to want to dig in. And if it came together better, I would like to know that. It's just I've had a hard time getting over that hurdle. Narratively, I agree with you. I do think there are some good ideas there. Narratively, time travel is a staple of sci-fi, and I definitely think it has a place in the game. They just were toying with mechanics that I have long not enjoyed in my games.
I don't have that deep wealth of experience with tabletop RPG. Or I don't have that deep well of experience with tabletop RPGs. I'm a little newer to the hobby.
Mm-hmm.
I was again. It was the only
Mm-hmm.
caster I wanted to play.
Mm-hmm.
And I was excited for it. But by that time, my group just wasn't playing Starfinder very often.
Mm-hmm.
So
All right. Well, I think we can safely call this collab the collab where we make all of the Starfinder caster fans angry at us. So now we're going to get into what is arguably the most unique class in the entire game, the Solarian. So, what are your thoughts on the Solarian? Solarian, what score did you give it? And what's your take on this unique offering that Paizo gives?
you know, I gave Solarian a 5 out of 10,
Mm-hmm.
and it was really cool. It was. It's just a cool. It's a little weird that their
Mm-hmm.
manifestation does physical damage.
Mm-hmm.
Neither here nor there. Well, I mean, it's here. That's what we're talking about. Sorry. It's a little weird that its manifestation does physical damage.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just gonna leave it at that. It's weird.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it came straight out of the pen, just swinging for the fences with just solid theme.
Mm-hmm.
Just the having this balance of forces that you got to maintain one or the other, and you've got really cool abilities on either side. You can't do them both at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't overload one. You have to diversify, and so you've got to explore all of the cool things about the class to get the best out of it, and it
Mm-hmm.
supports that kind of play. Or it did until Broken Cycle was a thing, and Broken Cycle doesn't seem busted. I've seen people say that Broken Cycle is busted mechanically, like it's too powerful. It didn't seem busted
Mm-hmm.
to me, but it nukes the theme.
Mm-hmm.
It nukes what the class is about. That's like being a mystic, and then you get this option where you don't cast spells. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
why? Why? I That frustrated me.
The Solarian for me is a class where I see the potential, but I don't know if it lives up to it. I gave them a 6 out of 10, um, and a lot of the stuff you mentioned, I'm completely agreeing with you on. Like the graviton versus the photon, and I love the push and pull of those mechanics. The idea that there's this tension between these two different sides, and you're trying to balance that tension, uh, and balancing that is what make is or at least is what's supposed to make the class effective. It's very unique narratively, and it's very interesting mechanically. I think some of the mechanics, like you mentioned earlier on the Evolutionist kind of dives into some similar mechanics, and maybe dives into them a little bit better in some ways, and I can see that. But overall, the concept was good, but the execution has always been, I'm not sure if they're there. Just there's just multiple points, and a lot of people I know who have played the class have said the same thing, that like it was okay, they liked the idea, but it never quite panned out the way they were hoping it would.
Another thing that occurred to me that I forgot to mention, its key stat is charisma,
Yes.
which puts it in a similar place to a lot of the casters, where they
Mm-hmm.
have a key stat that doesn't really apply to combat.
Mm-hmm.
But this is worse because combat seems to be what the Solarian is trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you either have to be able to hit things, or you have to be able to make your cool abilities stick. It's very hard to do both at the start. You gotta wait later until you can, hit things consistently and get your abilities to stick, or
Mm-hmm.
not have them pass their saves and your
Mm-hmm.
ability didn't do anything. It's
Yeah, I feel you.
that's a little stumbling. That's a stumbling block on it. That's kind of like having a caster have a physical stat
Mm-hmm.
for their main stat, but for
Yeah.
casters that's overpowered, and for marshals going the other way, it's kind of underpowered.
Mm-hmm. The Honestly, the Solarian is one that I'm excited to see it revamped in second edition, because I think this is a class that has a lot of potential. The narrative is there and is engaging, and in terms of like sci-fi properties, very unique. Like I the closest I have found to the Solarian would be something like the Green Lanterns, but even for them, the narrative is very different. And so I think this is something very like Paizo can claim it and say, this is our pretty thing that we have come up with. So like I want them to revisit this and really let it hit its potential in
Yeah,
second edition.
and it's definitely coming to second edition. It's definitely going to be in the core rulebook. It
Mm-hmm.
is too iconic to
Mm-hmm.
Starfinder, and it's too unique to
Mm-hmm.
not. It's
Yeah.
definitely in its own niche. It doesn't pile on top of any of the Pathfinder second edition classes, as far as I can think of.
Mm-hmm.
That I don't see any problem with it being brought to a second edition.
Yeah.
There's no conflict of interest there.
Mm-hmm. Overall, Solarian is kind of a middle of the pack class for me, but it is a class with a lot of potential. So the next one up is the Soldier. So, what are your thoughts on the Soldier, and what grade did you give it?
Noticing I marked it wrong in my notes, but don't worry, I corrected it. I corrected it upwards. I feel like the soldier was in a very similar boat to the mystic, in that being the premier fighter class
Mm-hmm.
of Starfinder, and it being the future of a Pathfinder world, it had to do a lot of things that there's a bunch of martial classes. It had to
Mm-hmm.
get all the core things and do them all distinctively enough that you felt like you could really do those in Starfinder. Now, I admit I slept on the soldier.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really look at them for a while because I mean, I had the mechanic, and then there was the Vanguard, and then there was the Nanocyte, and Biohacker, all these things that immediately captured my imagination. The soldier just didn't stand out to me at first.
Mm-hmm.
But looking back at them, they can do the barbarian thing. They can do the monk thing. They've got all the bases covered. And then, like the Mystic, they just got better and better and better as they got more and more expansions. They're very cool. They've got some very distinctly sci fi things.
Mm-hmm.
They've got all the stuff they brought up from Pathfinder, I think they're a great class, and that's why they got an 8 out of 10 for me.
Well, I gave them the exact same score, 8 out of 10. And Soldier is actually my second class overall in the entire game. And there's a lot of reasons that I could say this. I think you hit a lot of the solid selling points of the class. Their fighting styles cover a lot of the different kind of historical niches that the class needed to hit, and did it in a sci-fi. Like, I think you hit a lot of the things that the soldier needed to do and did well. Um, but there is a small element of the soldier that the more I've played the game, the more I've looked at the class, I just think was really, really good game design, and that's gear boosts. Now, mechanically, these are not the most powerful aspect of the class. They're not the driving force of the class. Your fighting style is the core of what you're doing, and you've mentioned a lot of the strengths of that aspect of the soldier. But one of the things that makes Starfinder unique as a game is gear. You know, when you think about sci-fi versus fantasy, what's going to be one of the main selling points of sci-fi? It's going to be the technology that's in the setting. Yeah, there's just all these cool toys that you get to play with, and there are some classes like the mechanic or the nanocyte that we've already discussed that dive headfirst into the technology, and that's really their sphere that they like to run around in. But a lot of classes kind of ignore this essential part of the game. It's a sci-fi game. Technology is a big part of what you're doing, and so the way your class interacts with the technology of the game is a very important component of the game design. And when you look at the gear boost and the incredible plethora of options that the soldier gets, it's one of my favorite things about the class. And it makes sense. You're a soldier, you know how to get the most out of your gun, out of your armor, out of your grenades. You know all the little tricks that make your weapons more effective. And it's just like, it's a really good mix of the mechanics and the narrative that solidifies the class inside of the setting. And, like you mentioned, it's easy to overlook.
Yeah, it's the difference between the mechanic can build
Mm-hmm,
a really cool gun, and the soldier knows how to take care of their firearm. They
mm-hmm,
know in what conditions it's likely to jam. They know how to avoid that.
mm-hmm,
They've got a deep intuitive experience with their technology,
mm-hmm,
which, thinking about it now, that it's great that got represented.
mm-hmm.
Um, that's awesome.
Yeah. It's a small element of the class. It's not the core of the class by any measure, but it's such a smart design that I really respect Paizo doing that. And it's one of those, like, when you're diving through, you've got the Technomancer, and you've got the Mystic, and you've got the Solarian, you've got all of these other crazy things. Soldier sounds kind of plain. You can skip it if you're not paying attention. And really, it's just a very solid class. So now that we've both been really complimentary of a martial class, how about we dive back into spellcasters? uh, are you ready to talk about the Technomancer?
Yeah. Do you want to lead this one off, or would you like me to?
I can lead this one off, I guess. Um,
It needs a friend. It needs a friendly hand.
I'll try to be friendly. I will say the Technomancer scored a 6 out of 10 for me. It's kind of in that batch of classes that are all very similar in terms of the score that they got, but it's in the back of that group of classes. It ranks 9 out of 13 for me. The Technomancer, honestly, for a very long time, I couldn't put my finger on why I didn't like the Technomancer. And I might save this for after you've shared your thoughts on the Technomancer. I've come to realize I think the problem with the Technomancer is not necessarily with the Technomancer, but rather with spellcasting in Starfinder as a whole. Because I think the Technomancer kind of encapsulates one of the problems I have with spellcasting in this system. Um, but I want to hear your thoughts. What are your thoughts on the Technomancer?
I'm going to lead off with I'm relatively certain I'm not being fair to this class. I'm relatively certain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I gave it a 4 out of 10.
Okay.
And I mean, first of all, as a spellcaster, I don't think the spellcasting is just not great in Starfinder.
Mm-hmm.
I've said it a dozen times already.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I feel like the core chassis of the class doesn't su- it tries,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't feel like it does enough to support what Technomancer sounds like in my head. I'm sure that the spells it has are super focused in on
Mm-hmm.
manipulating and controlling technology, but when you have 6 levels of spells and a handful of slots and almost no slots at low levels, it has to lean on its core chassis, and I just don't think the core chassis is there on
Mm-hmm.
supporting the theme of technomancing.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, in its benefit, it got expanded where it could get a mechanic drone, and that makes everything better.
Fair. Very fair.
But its core magic technology relationship, I don't know, I expected more interaction there. I I just
Mm-hmm.
it felt like it should have been a mechanic plus a mystic together, not whatever it is.
So, I think you are expressing a lot of the same frustrations I had. For a very long time, I would look at the Technomancer and I'd just be like, something's wrong. Something's wrong here, you know? And like, I couldn't put my finger on it. And finally, I realized the problem playing Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. I realized something that I don't like in D&D 5e, and then I realized that the Technomancer does the exact same thing, and suddenly I understood why the class just didn't appeal to me. In D&D 5e, metamagic is restricted to one class, the sorcerer.
Yeah.
They made one class the class that can play around with the parameters of their spells.
And it wasn't the class that is studied in the arcane arts.
Right. I won't chase that any farther because I could. But just the decision in D&D 5e that only one class could really do meta magic is one of the things about spellcasting in that system that really bothers me. And then suddenly, when I was looking at the Technomancer, I was like, they don't use the term meta magic, but that's what the Technomancer does.
Mm.
Their magic hacks are essentially meta magic abilities. That's what they're doing. They're playing around with the parameter of their spells, and that's the identity of the class. Which means that other classes like the Mystic, the Witchwarper, and the Precog are excluded from doing that, at least excluded from doing that in the way they could have. And at the same time, while I enjoy meta magic or the concept of meta magic, that's not, as you said, a technomancer. Like, the identity of the class is not the name of the class.
I
And
mean, sorry, go ahead.
and it just holds the class back. And honestly, I feel like if Paizo hadn't made that decision on spellcasting, if they had said, we're going to let, magic hacks be something that any spellcasting class can do, and maybe the Technomancer has more options or something like that, but if we make playing with the parameters a common feature of spellcasting, then I feel the Technomancer could have had a chance to dive into the actual manipulating technology that they should have had, and then I feel like the class would have been where it needed to be.
Imagine, imagine if you could hack into a network and then cast a spell from a screen somewhere else in the building.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine that kind of, like, the mechanic gets abilities like that where you can
Mm-hmm.
use a screen somewhere else to
Mm-hmm.
cause distractions and stuff. Or
Mm-hmm.
you can use your drone to go do like an overload on something.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if the Technomancer could do stuff like that.
Yes.
It would have been awesome.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been awesome. That'd be cool.
So,
Maybe.
so Paizo, if you see this video, you know what we want with the Technomancer in 2E. Uh, I do think the concept is solid and is worth exploring in a sci-fi setting. So the Technomancer is something I want to see return in second edition, but I don't want its identity to be the meta magic caster. Open that up to everybody and then give it the ability to play with technology, like we said with the soldier, key part of sci-fi. Let the Technomancer lean into the stuff it needs to lean into.
Yeah. I mean, I think the idea is cool.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see the concept actually be done because I just don't
Mm-hmm.
feel like the Technomancer did it.
Yeah.
Um, I'm hoping. Here's
Mm-hmm.
hoping.
All right. We will move on to the Vanguard. And I'm going to say the Vanguard is in a weird place for me. I'll go ahead and kick this conversation off because the Vanguard feels like a class I should like, but ultimately it doesn't quite land. Um, I gave it an overall score of 6 out of 10. It ties the Technomancer, but I actually like the Technomancer just a hair more. So this one lands 10th place for me. Thematically, playing with Chaos Powers is fun. I love Chaos Powers, and any class that plays with Chaos Powers appeals to me. And honestly, the Vanguard as a tanking style class, I actually enjoy playing a tank. When I played World of Warcraft, my favorite thing to do was to play a paladin and be the tank for the party. I love tanking. I love kind of that mentality inside of games. So the Vanguard is theoretically combining a playstyle I like with a thematic element I like, but somewhere in the middle they don't meet in a way that feels right for me. Um, and kind of like, you know how you said with the Technomancer you had trouble explaining how, like, it just didn't feel quite right to you? That's
Mm.
kind of where I am with this class. I wish I could put it better into words, but it doesn't land. um, it's got good elements, it's got good ideas, and I wish I could put into words how to make those things meet. But as the class stands, it's just never been one that appealed to me. But what are your thoughts on the Vanguard?
Man, I mean, I disagree in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in a few ways, the ways that matter. I gave it a 10 out of 10. I love the Vanguard. I think they're awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think I see what I think I could see what you mean
Mm-hmm.
about the idea of tank and chaos powers having trouble meshing up.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I feel that mechanically they worked really well together. I feel like the entropy points, all the things that get you entropy points are the things that put you in front.
Mm-hmm.
They're the things that get you in the middle of the fight. They're
Mm-hmm.
the things that make you tank,
Mm-hmm.
that make you draw enemy attention. So I feel like the chaos powers support the tanking.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're tanking, you're absorbing this force, and you're not just taking hits. You're
Mm-hmm.
feeding on the chaos of battle,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're redeploying it. And I loved that so much.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the ones that captured my
Mm-hmm.
imagination. I I feel like it handled that bridge. I feel like it handled that bridge really well,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like it got really well expanded on in future
Mm-hmm.
books. It got a whole series of different options for what
Mm-hmm.
kinds of stuff it could mess with, for what its main like attacks could be, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember if it got an ability to do electricity damage, which was a little weird. I'm not sure how that one fits in, but diversity, I
Mm-hmm.
arguably that one hurts the theme.
Um, the like overall, I see a lot of things I like in the class, and I don't blame Paizo for the things that they threw in. It's just kind of one of those weird. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where it's like you've got two foods that you like, but when they mix, the taste isn't right
Mm.
for some reason. I kind of feel like that happened to me with this class, and I wish I had a better way of describing it or identifying it, because truthfully, there are a lot of good ideas here. And a lot of the stuff you describe, like feeding on the chaos of battle, is very cool and very narrative, and, like, it hits on things I do like. And I wish I could find just whatever little twist in the rules it is that isn't landing for me, because I feel like if I could fix that, this is one of those classes that would be firing on all cylinders for me. So,
Perhaps folks in the chat
mm-hmm.
will have been particularly frustrated by this conundrum themselves, and they'll have thought on it for a while, and
Mm-hmm.
they'll be able to offer us suggestions. I just counter with one ability it can get,
Mm-hmm.
where it can step in front of a moving vehicle, and the moving vehicle takes more damage than it does. Super niche,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're moving vehicles all over the place, but how often are they in combat?
Mm-hmm.
And you're not also in a moving vehicle? Like, but, oh, it's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's so cool.
Yeah. The I certainly see the potential of this class, and things like that are where this class has so much potential. And maybe someday my brain will click the last piece it needs. But all right, let's close this video off with what I'm sure will not at all spark any controversy. A class that I'm sure has no detractors in the Starfinder community whatsoever. What are your thoughts on the Witchwarper?
3 out of 10,
Okay.
which I know that chafes. I feel like they were so close.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they were just this close. Their core chassis is just this close
Mm-hmm.
to doing what I feel like they should be doing, and that is altering the battlefield in massive, meaningful ways. And they do alter the battlefield in, meaningful ways. Um, and it is cool.
Mm-hmm.
It does feels, and it's probably mechanically balanced too.
Mm-hmm.
God, if it was just, sorry, but if it was just that much better at altering the environment around it, it would have clicked for me. And
Mm-hmm.
it just didn't. And then it's a spellcaster, and it
Mm-hmm.
it kind of stumbled into the same kind of zone as the Technomancer. In fact, I should move the Technomancer down to 3 and bring the Witchwarper up to 4, because the theme is a little more well supported, and they both got the same problem of not quite meeting
Mm-hmm.
what the word means. But I think the Technomancer's a little worse on that. So we'll switch those around. The Technomancer gets a 3, the Witchwarper gets a 4.
Well, fans of this channel probably know that Witchwarper is my favorite class in Starfinder. Um, and for everyone who is about to jump down to the comments section, by all means do so. But I know the comments section is going to talk about the Witchwarper is not balanced, it doesn't do all the stuff it's supposed to do. And to that I say, I'm a fan of the Witchwarper. I reject your reality and substitute my own. Um,
On brand.
the this is very much a class where I love the narrative so much that it sells the class for me. I I will admit mechanically I do think there are some issues with the class, and that is why I didn't give it a 10 out of 10. You know, they've already mentioned for Starfinder 2E that the Witchwarper is going to be in the core rulebook. So, and I was super excited when that was announced. I do hope that they can come at this class and get the mechanics up to snuff, because the narrative and flavor of the class is just so engaging to my brain. It tells the kind of stories I want to tell. It does the kind of things that I want to do. The idea of this character that can walk through the battlefield, and now the battlefield is an entirely different location. I don't know. I don't know if you've ever played the old game Final Fantasy VI. Uh, there was a character in that game. One of their special abilities could change the terrain, and they had different abilities that could be wildly inappropriate to where you were actually fighting, but they had changed the terrain to match. And that was a fantasy game, but it was a very cool ability. And the Witchwarper kind of, like, that is a unique mechanical niche. It's very interesting. I absolutely love it. On top of that, one of the things that the Witchwarper's been around long enough that it's benefited from the expansion that the game's had. Some of the alternate class features are really, really fun. Mechanically, infinite tech is probably not very good, but the idea of a character who is borrowing their technology from an alternate universe is just entertaining to me. I love the idea. And then one of the latest ones is called The Projected, where you have somehow shunted yourself out of another reality into this one, and this reality is trying to push you back out. You know, there's the
Which is
narrative.
a sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Which is a perfect fit for kobolds if you know their story in Starfinder.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Not gonna spoil it here, but I do believe I have a video about those.
So, just the narrative on this class is really, really good, and ultimately that's why it's my favorite. I will admit, yes, the mechanics aren't where they should be. But this is one of those classes where the narrative is so good, I can look past that. Um, but I also look forward to second edition, where hopefully the narrative and mechanics are up to snuff. So, but any other thoughts on the Witchwarper?
No, I think I've derided it enough for one day. I
Well,
mean, if I must, one of the the later options it got overlapped with infinite tech in a superfluous. It
mm-hmm,
ended up not feeling particularly additive, in my
mm-hmm.
opinion. But I do think I've said enough mean things about about plenty of classes for today.
Well, thankfully we have finished all the classes we have to say mean or nice things about. Um, Truthfully, I with every class in this, I think in all of the cases you can see that Paizo had great ideas. And the cool thing is, going forward into Starfinder Second Edition, I think we're going to see some of those ideas pushed forward to maybe not their full potential, but greater potential at the very least. So,
Starfinder First Edition. Get to start saying that now. Starfinder First Edition.
mm-hmm,
Starfinder First Edition was definitely experimental
mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways. They tried a lot of new weird things, and I love it. Um, and it's going to be good to see it get that refinement pass
Mm-hmm.
as it gets brought up to the modern standard.
But in any case, I guess we will go ahead and wrap stuff up. This is the well. I guess first, Goat King. If someone is interested in your channel, if they want to check you out, uh, where can they find you, and what? Sell yourself a bit.
Well, you guys can find me at GoatKingDice right here on YouTube. I probably should start getting into social media too, huh? Well, that's tomorrow's problem.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, you can find me here on YouTube at GoatKingDice. That is my channel. I welcome you all.
Mhm.
Uh, come in, taste of my offerings, and decide whether you want to join the realm.
And I will say that I discovered your channel because of those very first videos you did about Starship Combat. They were extremely helpful. So if you're one of those people who's trying to learn that, that is the reason I subscribe to his channel, and I encourage you to go check him out. So, but now comes the portion of the conversation where we turn this over to the comments section. Let us know your thoughts about all of the classes. Let us know where you agree with us, where you disagree with us. Let us know some of the things you are excited for in Starfinder 2nd Edition and what Paizo might be doing with these classes. We would love to hear what you all have to say. And as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation. Have a wonderful day.